You really have to slow down. If you want to do conflict better, it can't be quick, because after each move, to some degree, you have to figure out what is happening and how to deal with it in a way that you respect. You're not going to get this perfectly. You are going to have redos. You're going to have to do it again. Hello, and welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm Heidi. I'm a couples therapist and relationship coach specializing in mixed orientation marriages and mixed gender identity relationships. Whether you're just discovering this reality or you've been on this journey for a long time, this is the space where your marriage matters, your values matter, and your choices matter. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Complex Couples Podcast. So glad you're here, diving into these topics with me. Last time after I finished recording on the topic of regression and swimming up, I became keenly aware that some of you may be the kind of person who takes a lot of responsibility for things. And you may feel like if you just got this right, your partner will change. And the reality is, I don't know that. I don't know if they will change. Some people do and some people do not. So I mentioned dealing with my husband's defensiveness and that he softened when I self-confronted and asked, like, is this the way I'm approaching it, right? But sometimes it's not about how we approach it at all. We can be approaching things very well and we're still going to get a response that is going to trigger something in us because essentially it's concerning. So I want to talk a little bit more about that today, about what do you do when there's really a legitimate cause for you to be regressed. So I'm not saying that there aren't going to be things that happen that trigger something for you. But as we've talked about before, triggers are lighthouses, and regression is essentially a response to a trigger, acute regressions at least. And so when you are acutely regressed, you're not going to handle things as well. So I want to help prevent that from happening, to help you so essentially you don't go into regression as quickly. You can look at what the trigger was and handle it differently. One of the ways of looking at this, and David Schnarch uses these terms, and sometimes they're not the most helpful for me, but also there are helpful things about it. So I'm going to talk about it in the terms he uses. He talks about how we all make moves on each other. As human beings, we make moves on each other. It's kind of like a game. We want what we want and we're trying to get what we want. And quite frankly, sometimes we go to really desperate measures to get what we want. So whether that's wanting more engagement from a partner or it's wanting your partner to leave you alone, we do different things to back people off or to get them closer or whatever it is we want. So we all, quote, make moves on each other. The reason I don't love this terminology is because I think it can sound nefarious. And I actually think that can increase the chance of regressing instead of decreasing it. Because when we look at it as nefarious or something that they know they're doing to us, we can have a harder time dealing with it. Now, I will say there are times that is true, and we have to increase our capability even more. But I like to start from a position of assuming that they don't know, that this is their native tongue, that essentially somehow they learned that these moves work. So let me give you a brief example of a move that was made on me recently. So my daughter was making a sandwich and she asked me to help her put the mayo on the sandwich. Now she's 11, so I was like, she doesn't need help putting mayo on this sandwich. And so I said, no, I think you've got this. You can do it yourself. And then she just said, please, Mom, whenever you put the mayo on my sandwich, it always tastes better. Like, you just have a way of doing it that tastes way better. And I was seriously in the process of getting out of my chair to go put the mayo on her bread when my husband laughed really hard and said, wow, you really know how to get to your mom. and I had to check myself because I was like, oh yeah, she really can. She knows that the way to get to me is flattery. that essentially I am capable of being flattered and I will respond to flattery. So I could get really mad at my daughter for using flattery against me, which I will say that's how I handled this in the beginning. I would get really angry at someone for, quote, making me regress. But it's not their fault that I'm getting regressed, right? I have control over if I choose regression or if I choose to take a different position. If I choose to be a person who is not capable of being flattered and can handle that move in a different way. We are naturally going to do what works for us. And so our partner is going to do what works for them too. And the way out of that is to essentially choose a new position and to stay in it, to consistently show up in a different way because they're always mapping us, right? We map each other, we map what works. And if it stops working, we have to update our maps and try new moves. Now, it's a little frustrating because people will try new moves on you and you will have to increase your capability once again. But this is development. This is really how we grow as humans. Nothing's going wrong. This is the natural system of relationships, and we just have to learn how to cope within them. So we can look at it as evil, or we can look at it as, to some degree, evolution and resourcefulness, and decide that we want to also be resourceful and wise. One of the things that I often think of when I am handling conflict or navigating conflict and trying to do it in ways I respect is the phrase from the scriptures, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. If we're going to handle the moves people make, one of the biggest things that we need to do is we have to mean well. So I'm going to walk through this example and just hopefully give you an idea of how you can navigate this in a different way, but also illustrate how difficult it can be to mean well. So say you ask your spouse something like this. Hey, I noticed you didn't come to bed until after midnight last night. Were you looking at porn again? So say that's the question. I'm not saying that's the proper way to handle this. I haven't even thought about that for this scenario, okay? But it's just an example. And this is the response they get from their partner. Their spouse responds like this. How could you infer that? You know I've been trying to change. That is likely to trigger something in me. If I get that response from my partner when I'm asking them about porn use, and porn use has been something that they've been struggling with, and we have determined that I have a right to know, both of us have determined that, then to some degree, I have a right to ask this question. And my spouse is responding as if I don't have a right to ask this question, as if I'm being nosy. Okay. But see, the first step in this is getting precise on what just happened. And I did that super quickly just now. Most of us don't actually realize what happened. All we recognize is that I feel bad right now. My spouse responded in that way, and maybe all of a sudden I feel guilt, or I feel shame, or I feel justified. Some feeling comes up for me, and I might see red, or I might feel guilty. I might actually question, should I be asking this question? Is it okay? And so they respond that way, and then I feel guilty. So then I go into a position of, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to infer this. Or if I get justified, I go into an angry position of like, how could you act like that when I ask this question? Okay, so I'm trying to get myself out of both of those positions because one is an inferior position and one is a superior position. And I really want to be able to come from a position of equality and of meaning well. So first of all, that's going to take some self-soothing. It's going to take a minute for me to actually get myself together. And here's the truth. Your partner's probably still talking because they probably didn't just stop there. They probably kept talking, and you're probably still just trying to figure out what in the world just happened. I feel all these emotions, but I don't know what happened. So you really have to slow down. If you want to do conflict better, it can't be quick Because after each move, to some degree, you have to figure out what is happening and how to deal with it in a way that you respect. And I mentioned last time, relationships are rupture and repair. So you're not going to get this perfectly. You are going to have redos. You're going to have to do it again. Believe me, you're going to have plenty of chances to work on this. So once I have self-soothed, once I have really looked at what is it that just happened? My mentor calls it looking at the mouth of the regression. I really like how she puts it. Looking at the mouth of the regression, what just happened to cause me these feelings? And take as much time as you need. Maybe ask your partner, hey, can I take a break? I need to figure something out. Walk away, but make sure you come back, okay? Or if they just keep talking and they won't give you a break, you don't have to listen to what they're saying while you figure this out. And you can take it back to the point where you understand what happened to you, okay? So some of the things that help me understand what happened. I asked myself a couple of questions. One is, did they answer the question? The answer in this case is no. They did not answer the question, okay? What did they do instead of answering the question? So looking to see, what did they do with my question? Well, in this case, they turned it into an accusation that I am doing something wrong. And then how can I soothe myself around this and not see them as a terrible person? Because if I do that, I'm definitely going to go into a position of feeling better than, feeling justified in my anger, and I am not going to meet them in a peaceable way. So the next step would be to ask myself, how can I show them I see them without shaming them for it? That helps me stay out of superiority, or without taking total blame and accountability and just taking it on myself, or going to the position that they're trying to get me in. That's what I want to avoid. I want to avoid going into the position that they want me in. And I want to go to the position I want to be in. It's not a rebellion thing. It's just, I want a different position. So I'm not going to go to that position of either being the persecutor because I asked the question, or being the victim because they responded a certain way. So then I'm going to take a position of equality. It's not a gotcha. It's not a I caught you, but it is showing them that you see what they did and giving them an opportunity to do it differently. So after I settled myself down, figured out what it was that just happened in that moment, and taken some time with it, not taking the accusation that they're putting out unless I feel like it's legitimate. Okay, some accusations are legitimate and I need to look at it. So I've got to sift through, is this legitimate? Did I do something wrong by asking that question? And the reality is I did not. In this case, given some factors, okay? So if we have decided that I am going to be included in this conversation about pornography, and we have an agreement on that, I'm not doing something wrong by asking a question about it. So I might say to my partner something like this: I noticed that you didn't answer my question, and you also inferred that I did something wrong by asking that question. Considering what we've decided and that I can be included on this journey with you, I don't believe I'm doing anything wrong by asking the question. Now, I can't determine if you're going to answer that question or not. You get to decide that. But I'm not going to take the position of feeling bad that I did something wrong for asking this question. So I'd like you to consider what you notice in that response. What's different about maybe how you've been responding? You might notice that it's not escalated, that it's calm, that it's coming from the best in me, and I'm trying to speak to the best in my partner. I'm trying to reach for the good in them that might actually answer this question in a different way. So I'm not trying to go to a new accusation, but I am calling out what is real, what is honest, what I see in front of me. Now, again, this is a process, and they might deny, they might throw it back at you, or they might actually soften and say, you know what, I did answer that way. We don't know, but it's all data. And continuing to get better and better at handling the moves that are made in conflict is going to help you respect yourself more and maybe, just maybe, get a different response. I cannot guarantee it. And you might be wondering if this is even worth it. The reality is you have to decide that. It is a lot of work. However, it helps in every situation, in every relationship moving forward. As you get better at it, it's going to help you so much in your life because this is going to replay in your job with your kids. It's not going to just be your spouse because people map something in you that says that these are the things that work on you. So you could give it a shot if you want. And if you don't, and if you say it's not worth it to me, that's okay too. You really do get to decide. I want to talk just for a moment about being aware of your own moves. Your partner is going to see those too, and they're going to start calling you out on them. And you might see some things in them that you don't want to see, but I would encourage you to be willing to look, okay? If you're trying to reestablish trust, your behaviors, your actions need to align with your words. And if you say it's really important to you that your partner look at their behavior, then you really need to be a person who's also willing to look at yours. So I'm just going to give a little example of my son calling me out on a move I made just yesterday. We were driving to church and he was talking to me about this plan that he had. And I was really proud of him. He had come up with a plan to buy something that he wanted and to pay us back instead of having the money up front. And he did a really good job telling me about this plan and advocating for his plan. But I rejected his plan because I felt like it's important for him to have the money up front and not to get into debt. And so we had a really good conversation about that. And when it was over, he was severely disappointed, as you might imagine. And his way of dealing with that disappointment was to just kind of shut down and to be angry. And so I noticed that I also had a lot of conflict in the morning in some other areas. So I was tired and I just wanted to listen to some rejuvenating music. I turned on some spiritual music and was ready to just take a breath. Well, my son immediately turned off my music angrily, and I wanted to respond by saying, hey, listen, you don't get to control this. But I started to recognize, you know what? He has desires. He wants silence right now. I want music. I don't want to sit in this conflict anymore. I feel done. So I asked him to hand me my AirPods so I could put them in and listen. So I put them in and I turned on the music and I started listening. And after I'd listened to like a song or two, I kind of started humming along. And my son started to get really irritated. And he's like, Mom, stop singing. I told you I wanted silence. And you're singing. And I didn't stop. And then he pushed pause on my music and I just continued humming the song. And my son got really frustrated, okay, at this point. Gosh, I'm laughing. This is embarrassing, but we all do this stuff, okay? We all retaliate sometimes. So anyway, my son really, he saw me and he saw me clearly. And he's like, Mom, you are acting like a 5-year-old. And I stopped in my tracks because I was like, he is totally right. I am just doing this to get at him. And I am 47 years old. It's ridiculous. And knowing that, I wanted him to know that he was right about it. I wanted him to be able to trust his ability to map someone and to deal with conflict. So I stopped humming, I stopped the music, and I asked him more. I said, you know what? You might be right about that. Can you tell me more what you're seeing? And he outlined for me. He said, you knew I wanted silence. And you started humming. And when I asked you to stop, you kept going and you even got louder. And you were just doing that to spite me, basically. He didn't use those words because he's a teenager, but those are the words in my head. I knew he was right. And I told him how proud I was of him for actually seeing that and addressing that. And that I was sorry that I had done that and that I should have honored. And I asked him if anything else was bothering him. And he went on to advocate for his position more about what he wanted and that I had rejected that. And I was able to look at that with a solidness because I knew that I was doing what was good for him by saying no. So I told him that I was giving him that answer I could honestly say because I loved him and I wanted him to be successful with money. And I was trying to teach him some important things, but that I understood why that would cause disappointment and that I could have handled that better by just actually sitting in the disappointment with him, by being okay with him being disappointed instead of having to shut him out too. And I mean, he doesn't know what was going on for me that morning. He doesn't know that there were other things. And it felt like I was at capacity in that moment. But if I could have gone back, I would have increased my capacity to just sit in the disappointment and to just be okay with him being disappointed and be proud of him for not lashing out, because that was a really good position. I hope that this gives you some ideas on handling regression, looking at the mouth of the regression, recognizing that sometimes you may be triggering a regression for someone else. And I hope it gives you a new perspective going forward in conflict. Thank you for listening. I know that this is hard stuff. Please, please be kind to yourself as you're trying to implement these things. And just know that, again, your value doesn't come from if you're successful or not. But neither does your spouse's. They matter. You matter. Keep that in mind as you move forward. And if you have questions, comments, please email me, Heidi@complexcouplescoaching.com. I'm working on new resources. I'm excited to be introducing a little private podcast soon for people who want to know more about some of these concepts. So if you join my email list, you'll be the first to know about those things. And you can do that at my website, www.complexcouplescoaching.com. Thanks for being here. Have a great week.